Everybody remembers Mitsuru for her marine Karen's memes and her execution quotes at the hot spring. But did you know her last name Kirijo means pollinator trees, the very same names as the mall in the games, and the trees also known as the Empress trees. That said, that's just only her names. Her designs hides even more beautiful details, why her bangs always cover one eye, why Penthesilea fights with a sword and a daggers, and why Artemisia has what looks like a dog on her belt. So let's get all of this answered and more. But like usual, to really appreciate these details, we have to start with the story. Decades ago, before the events of Persona 3, Mitsuru's grandfather Koetsu, the head of the Kirijo group at the time, ran an experiment on shadows in an attempt to control and harness their power. However, as you know it, the experiment went catastrophically wrong, resulting in the death of the research team and the creation of Tartarus and the Dark Hours. Now, under Mitsuru's father's Takeharu's leadership, he's ordered the first exploration inside Tartarus, in which Mitsuru, who was still very young at the time, requested to accompany him. Once inside, one of the guards lost control over their artificial persona, which turned them into a shadow. And as the shadow approached Takeharu, little Mitsuru threw herself between the shadow and him. And in that very moment, her power awakened for the very first time, and she protected him. The adults around her then realized that she was going to be something special. However, instead of being proud, Takeharu grieved as he knew what his daughter's life was going to become. But despite that, Mitsuru told him that she would protect him. And she did exactly that as she grew up. By the time we meet her in Persona 3, she ran the student council, top of her class, fences competitively, and formed Cs with Ikusugi, Akihiko, and Shinjiro. On November the 4th, 2009, something unexpected happened. Ikusugi betrayed Cs and shot Takeharu right in front of her. Takeharu, however, managed to fatally wound him before the end, and both men died that night. Heartbroken by this, Mitsuru blamed herself. The way she sees it, it was her trust in Ikusugi that got her father killed. And for a while, Mitsuru loses even the will to live. Now, Mitsuru fights with a persona most players never think too much about. A queen who conceals her face inside a silver helmet. But her name is doing something interesting, something that the game never stopped to explain. If you happen to translate it, it's turned out to be a single Greek word, one that describes exactly what Mitsuru is going through right now. Mitsuru's first persona is Penthesilea. She was a queen of the Amazon and the daughter of Ares, the god of war. One day, while she was out hunting with her sister Hippolyta, she threw a spear at a deer. It misses and struck Hippolyta instead, killing her. The guilt of this event broke Penthesilea, and she grieved so badly she lost the will to live. So she went looking for a way out. She joined the Trojan War in its final years, fighting for Troy. And for most accounts, she was really there to fight an honorable death in battles. For a single day, she cut through the Greek armies until she ran into Achilles, the greatest fighter Greeks had, and he killed her. Persona 3 records what happened next in its compendiums. When Achilles took off her helmet and saw her beautiful face, he felt great remorse for killing her. That said, the name Penthesilea comes from penthos, the Greek word for grief. Depending on how you read it, it can mean mourned by the people or she who causes men to mourn. Either way though, the name is grief, the way both Mitsuru and Penthesilea carry, because both women are fighting to atone for crime in the past. Penthesilea is answering for the sister she killed, Mitsuru for her grandfather's creation of the Dark Hour, which she blames herself for even though the guilt was never hers to carry. Now, apart from that, the myth also has a second thread worth pulling. In the version of Penthesilea's story told by the poet Quintus Seminarus, the women of Troy watched her fight and were moved enough that one of them, Tisiphone, tried to rally the rest to take up arms too. arguing that women are not creatures cast by diverse mold from men, and pointing straight at Penthesilea fighting in front of them as proof. Agreeing with her, the women flung down their weaving and riches for weapons. This fit Mitsuru's character as a strong woman who inspires and leads others, and a lot of people read that as women are equal to men, but most also skip the next part of the story because it seemed to contradict that readings of her. Before the women of Troy could actually join the battles, an older woman, Theano, talked them out a bit. She said, "Why are you so eager to fight? You never fought before, you have no idea what real combat demands, and you'll never match trained soldiers. Amazons are different, they're raised as warriors from birth, so their queen really can go toe-to-toe with men. But that's not you. Everyone good at their own job. You're in the loom, not the battlefield. Stay home and let the man handle war. Besides, things are actually going well. Our men are winning, the enemy's losing ground. There's no real emergency that need you out there." Like I mentioned, many leave this part of the story out because it's weakening the links to the ideas that women are as capable as men. And I mean, it's not uncommon when writing to keep what strengthens your point and leave out what weakens it. That said, I'm leaving this in because I actually think it fits beautifully with one of Mitsuru's quotes. And this one is also for all of you Kotones fans. In Persona 3 Portable, when Junpei spoke about following a girl into battles, Mitsuru tells him whether one is a man or woman doesn't factor into it. The responsibilities falls to those who have the gifts. The way I read this is that the speech from the myth is reaching for the same idea, and it's go beyond just women being equal to men. If you think about it, while Theano talked the women down, not once did she say they were not capable because they were women. The oldest woman, who has much more experience, understand that women can be just as capable because the proof is right in front of them as the Amazons overtakes the Greek army. But she's also understand more deeply that it's because they were trained from young age to be warriors, unlike the women of Troy who weren't. And that's pretty much the lie she's actually draws. Whoever puts in the trainings get to fight, removing gender from the frame entirely and focusing on capabilities. It's the very same shape, I think, as what Mitsuru is telling Junpei.
Even when I'm the only guy in the group.
Whether one is a man or a woman doesn't factor into it. The responsibility falls to those who have the gift. And let me add, if you ever say or do anything to condescend to her because she's a woman.
Oh, no. It's not like I look down on her or anything.
For a while, Mitsuru stayed at the lowest point. She had lost her father's and with him her reason to keep fighting. The way she saw it, there was nothing left she could do for him, and so no point in going on. This is drastic reveal compared to what we learned from her in the story in part 1. Her true reason for fighting was never to atone for her grandfather's sin, but to protect her fathers from harms. And now, just like how Penthesilea lost her reason to live after losing her sister, Mitsuru also lost the reason to fight after losing her fathers. The turns then came on the school trip to Kyoto, where Yukari was the one who reaches out to her. Yukari helped her see that she still had the part to play, that even with her father gone, she could carry out what he had set out to do, and see the Dark Hour destroyed the way he wanted.
I'm going to destroy the Dark Hour and finish what my dad started.
Finish what he started.
That's all I can do. That we can do, right, Mitsuru-senpai?
Takeba. You're right. It's not over just yet. We're going to see this through to the end, for my father's sake, and for yours.
Regaining her resolve, then Mitsuru take up her father fight as her own and become the next head of the Kirijo group, resulting in Penthesilea changing.
You don't need to worry, Father. I'm not alone. And I won't turn back anymore. Please, watch over me.
The story of Artemisia can be told as a simple one or kind of a super awesome multi-layered one. We of course going to go with that super awesome one. Artemisia apparently wasn't just one person. There was actually two real queens by that name, both also from Caria, and both also ruling the city of Halicarnassus about 130 years apart from each other's. Artemisia I was a naval commander who fought for Persia at the battles of Salamis, and most of what we know about her come from Herodotus. She was the only woman leading ships in the entire Persian fleet, and is the one that Persona referred to in the in-game compendium. Her most legendary moments came at Salamis when the Persian ruler Xerxes ignored her advice and sent her navy into battles against the Greeks. The battles turned into chaos almost immediately. The Greek fleet then trapped Persian larger navy in the narrow strait, and Persian ships started crashing into each other's as they tried to pull back. With a Greek ship also bearing down on her, Artemisia I outwitted them by ramping and sinking one of her own side ships to make her pursuer think that she has switched sides. And it works, and the Greek ship broke off the chase, allowing her to return to Xerxes and advise him to withdraw. And this time, he's actually listened. But like I mentioned earlier, there's also another Artemisia, and I've noticed how much Mitsuru Story also overlaps with her, since her whole legend is about grief. Artemisia II was a sister of King Mausolus, and by Carian royal custom also made her his wife. And like Artemisia I, she was also known for her sharp military commands. When Rhodes sent a fleet to invade Caria, she hid her own ships in a secret harbor her husband had built, let the Rhodians fleet dock and come ashore, then sail out and capture their empty ships. That said, her most famous moment was not about military wits, but grief. When Mausolus died, she was so lost in mourning that she mixed his ashes into her drink and swallowed them, keeping him inside her. For the 2 years she has left, she's also built him an enormous tomb, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, so famous it became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and it's where we get the word mausoleum in the first place. So what's the connection between the two figures and Mitsuru, and why did Atlus pick Artemisia I over the second? Let's start with how each of them get the crown. Artemisia I took the throne when her own husband died, while her son was still too young to rule. Artemisia II did the same thing a century later, becoming a queen the moment Mausolus died. Mitsuru Story also ran in a similar way, as she inherited the Kirijo group from her late fathers. Where the two queens actually split is what happened to the grief afterwards. Artemisia II never got past hers. She mixed her dead husband's ashes into her drink, built him the mausoleum, and went away within 2 years, which does not really fit Mitsuru's resolution. So let's refocus our attention to Artemisia I, as there are many details in her story that match Mitsuru's characters even more. Starting with the story element, Xerxes overruled her advice and forced that battles at Salamis, resulting in a disastrous defeat, which is a reminiscent of how Mitsuru's story starts, as Koetsu walked the Kirijo down the dark path, creating the dark hours. In the middle of that defeat, Artemis sank one of her own side ships to fool the enemy chasing her and slipped away. Watching this happen, Xerxes reportedly said, "My men has become women, and my women's men's." That said, if you think about it, he wasn't just plainly calling her brave. He was swapping the categories of the gender themselves, because what he saw didn't fit his own labels. That's the very same shape as Tisiphone and Theano argument for Penthesilea back in the last segment. Capability decide who fought in the fight, not gender. And once again reflect the Mitsuru quotes, whether one is man or woman doesn't factor into it. The responsibilities fall to those who have the gift. But that's not all, because later, Ikisugi, who was another man in power, used Mitsuru's trust to set his own plan in motion, which almost resulted in the loss of everybody's life. That said, both women survived their ordeal but suffer enormous loss. Artemis I didn't just lose one ship, but many others in the battles, and Mitsuru lost her fathers, her everything. So why did Atlus pick Artemisia I but not the second? I think it's because Artemis II's story is very similar to that of Penthesilea. It's about grief from the past and what a person chooses to do because of it. Artemisia II and Penthesilea could not escape it. They both ended up being controlled by it. But Mitsuru is different. She's no longer fighting to atone for her grandfather's past. She fought for the future that her father would have wanted, which fit Artemisia I much more, who's continued to command ships and advise Xerxes even after Salamis. Now, everything we just learned about Mitsuru, the grief, the fathers, the weight she carries alone, Atlus built straight into how she looked. And the closer you look, the more you'll appreciate how much thought went into it. Her whole design comes down to one line from the character designer Shigenori Sojima. He built Mitsuru to be a tough-looking woman on the exterior, but with a weak side in the interior. That's the composed student council president on the outside and the guilt-ridden sheltered girl underneath. Her name Mitsuru is written with the characters for beautiful and crane, and her last name Kirijo used the characters for the Polonia tree. Both the crane and the Polonias are the winter image in Japanese cultures, and that's where her ice affinity comes from, as both of her personas are not related to ice. The Polonias carries even more. It's known as the Empress tree, a tree that was traditionally planted when a baby girl was born, which line up with her Empress Arcana and her place as a Kirijo heirs. On top of that, there's a mall inside the games called the Polonia Mall, which might have been built when Mitsuru was born. That said, when it's come to my favorite detail, it has to be this. Have you ever noticed that Mitsuru bangs always covers one of her eyes? This design calls back to the Penthesilea myth, where in some version of the stories have Penthesilea lose an eye after her death. But I think the hidden eye might have more meaning behind it than just a direct tribute. Let us also take a look at Mitsuru's fathers. One of his prominent designs is an eye patch on one of his eyes that were damaged by a shadow. That said, Sojima decided to have it on the opposite eye from the one Mitsuru bangs high. So when you put the two of them side by side, it sort of reflects that Kirijo family motto he teaches her. Two in harmony surpasses one in perfection. Alone, she can't see the whole picture. Together, she can. And that's the exact lesson Mitsuru spent the whole game learning, that she can't carry everything by herself. And now that her father is gone, she must learn to rely on those she trusts. Mitsuru's own design already says a lot, but her persona say even more, because the two of them are packed with hidden details that trace her entire arc. Penthesilea shows up in an iron helmet that covers her entire face. She's a beautiful queen hiding herself in shame. She's armed with rapier and daggers. And while that pair might carry a deeper theme, I think its core design function is to reflect authentic Renaissance fencing, where the offhand daggers parries and the rapier strike. For the body, she wears a navy blue dress shirt with the white cravats, a small nudge to her ice affinity, and the result is an elegant, noble look. It pairs well with that little crown and fits Mitsuru's style. Now, over the dress shirt sits silver armor, reinforced across the left breast. But the detail that you should pay attention on is that armor is chained to her. So it's almost look like she's being born and constrained by it rather than something she wears by her own choice for protection. Overall, it's a beautiful design that tells the original myth silently in the most elegant way possible. That said, that's only half, or should I say, a quarters of what's great about this design. Because just like the quotes, two in harmony surpasses one in perfection, Penthesilea design shines the brightest when standing next to Artemisia. When Penthesilea becomes Artemisia, the whole design shifts, and every piece of it moves in the very same direction. Starting with the mask, Penthesilea is a full and silver helmet, sealing her face away completely. Artemisia, however, loses that helmet and slips on a red mask covering only the top half of her face. This red is Mitsuru. It is the primary colors that the game gave her. The entire discarded helmet is a genius level parallel of Mitsuru's discarded chain, and while continuing to respect the mask motif of Persona, since the series doesn't view masks as cowardice but as a necessity to face challenge. That said, a few things stay exactly the same. The navy garment is identical between them. The armor with the reinforced plates still sit over the left breast, and the right side is left blank, beautifully communicating that both personas belong to Mitsuru and that both maintain the ice affinities and their noble appearance. But what I find most interesting here is the color. On Penthesilea, silver dominates. Gold show up in only 3 places: the crown, the daggers, and the rapier. And even there, it's barely present. Silver, however, take up close to half of her. On Artemisia, that's reverse. Gold now dominates, lays over the navy dress, and the silver has mostly retreat. But it doesn't just retreat. It's actually transformed. On Penthesilea, silver is the color of the chain, the armor, and the helmet. Those were the items that represent shame, restraint, and grief. On Artemisia, those silver become a sharp spike, the whip, and the howl at her waist. The 3 items that strengthen her. It's an elegant way to show that grief can confine us, but it can also strengthen us if we chose to. Speaking of the howl and the whip, the name Artemisia actually means of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, whose hunting companions were her hounds. So the beast head at Artemisia waist, together with the whip, can be taken as encoding the goddess who is taking commands. Now, back to the gold colors. On Penthesilea, the small little crown is a reminder that this Amazon warrior is indeed a queen. Artemisia, however, has no crown, and yet the gold spread across her armors, so she doesn't need a crown because she's the embodiment of one. Put everything we learned today together, it is clear that the design is telling one story. Penthesilea is Mitsuru grief and her past, a queen fighting to answer for a crime, even calling death as penance, the same way Mitsuru chains herself to the sin she never committed. Artemisia is what grief becomes once she survives it. The same woman, now using her grief to face the future, choosing to honor her father's Takeharu will over atoning for her grandfather's crime. Beautiful.